August 3rd study session meeting with citizens' right to speak or comment on agenda items. Do we have somebody tonight? Yes, sir. Please come forward and give your name and address.
Good evening, Larry Matthews, 3851 Hoyt Street. And I'd like to comment on agenda item number 2, the Wheat Ridge Active Transportation item for tonight. I'm a little concerned about this survey and the methodology that was used, and I don't know yet what its intent is, but I think I need to point out that it's kind of flawed data. The survey was open to everyone with an interest in active transportation in Wheat Ridge. I mean, if the survey is supposed to be representative of the whole city, we just called a group that already has an interest in this particular specialty, and then we're going to try and extrapolate that data to the whole community. 202 residents answered the survey. That's less than 0.5% of the population, so that's a big extrapolation right there. We came up with some data, for instance, that 28% ride a bike to work at least a few times a month. Well, 28% of what group? Is that supposed to be the city? The group they called? I don't know. The national average is less than 0.5%. And even in the Kingdom of Boulder, they only get like about 16% of people that ride to work once in a while. So I'm really worried about what we're trying to prove with the data here. Not necessarily against bike riding, but what this survey is trying to tell us. And I don't believe it's got any kind of accurate results that can be applied to the whole city. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else going to speak tonight on items that are on the agenda? Okay. Well, let's move on. We'll start out with staff reports.
I don't think we have any additional staff reports tonight.
Okay, I didn't think so either. That was quick. Now, let's go on to the AT&T Community Survey presentation.
You can, or you can sit here.
You can sit here
We can
if it's
flick the slides for you if you'd like. Okay.
That'll be fine.
All right, good evening. So my name is Rachel Haltine, and I'm one of 4 officers with the Wheat Ridge Active Transportation Advisory Team. We're also known as the AT-ATs. And one of our favorite pastimes is listening to all of you guys struggle with if we're the AT-ATs or the AT-ATs. So we're the AT-ATs. I'm excited tonight because Charlie Myers is also with us. He is one of the other officers that I serve with. And Charlie is an especially valuable member of our team because he's also on Bike Jeffco, and I believe you're the secretary. Is that correct, Charlie? Yeah. All right. So he helps us connect regionally with our partners. So we're here tonight to present a couple of things to council. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you the work that we've been doing in the community and with you guys, and to share a little bit what we learned through the community survey that we conducted last month. So to begin with, let me see here. Well, this isn't the most exciting slide we have, so. Oh, there we go. Okay, I think we got it. Sorta. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see where we. Sorry, I haven't been on a. There we go. Okay, let's see how this goes. All right. So we'd like to begin tonight with discussing why this work's really important to us and why we believe it's important to our community. This is a quote from Gil Penalosa, who runs the 8 to 80 Institute, and he's one of the world's four thinkers on communities that really are vibrant and healthy for all. He says, people who are 8 and 80 are the indicator species for good places to live. Redesign our cities to keep them safe, healthy, and happy, and we'll have a place that works well for everyone. And this is really one of our core beliefs. And so when we are thinking about active transportation in our community, we really are thinking about 8 to 80. So from his travels and research, Gil Penalosa has distilled 5 essential ingredients for a great city or town. The The first is lively public spaces and parks. The second is streets that are safe for everyone who uses them. Comfortable options for bikers and walkers. And convenient, speedy public transportation. Of course, there's a fifth one, if I can get it to work here, which is public officials willing to collaborate with neighborhood residents. And I found pictures of just about all of you guys. My favorite is Jerry trying to hide behind the sticker. So I recognize in putting these pictures together that we're really fortunate to have such a good relationship with the city, and that you guys are taking an active interest in the activities that we're doing, but also what our community is doing. So what do we do as an advocacy organization? The Transit Center recently released a report, and in the report it says, the process begins with civic organizations that advocate for change and mobilize public support for policies. The grassroots advocacy groups are fundamental. According to the report, groups like the Active Transportation Alliance in Chicago and the Bicycle Transportation Alliance of Oregon play the key role of raising public awareness of the issues and generating support for change. So a little bit about us. I believe everyone sitting at the table knows, but for those of you who aren't aware of the work we do, we're a citizen-led volunteer organization that works with residents, city leadership, businesses, and partner organizations to increase the opportunities to walk, ride a bike, and connect with transit in Wheat Ridge. We engage our community in education, awareness, and encouragement around active transportation for all ages and abilities. And we wear a lot of Star Wars t-shirts, but that's not official. Some of our activities include events and activities. We also inform and inspire through meetings and different communication pieces. We do advocacy and action. This is a picture of two of my favorite advocates who will come and speak in favor of infrastructure to support safe routes to school. We also have action teams around safe avenues for everyone in bicycle-friendly community status, events, outreach, and next steps for 38th Avenue. And lastly, we like to connect and encourage people around walking and biking in our community. A couple highlights from this past year include attending the Colorado Bicycle Summit. We hosted 2 Bike to Work Day events. Both were highly successful. We drew from 22 different zip codes from the metropolitan area. We started a walking school bus in order to support schools in the 2015-2016 school year for increased walking to school. And then we've started the National Bike Challenge team, which I have told you guys about endlessly, but as of today, we're ranked 86th out of almost 1,900 teams nationally, and we have cycled over 21,000 miles since the 1st of May, so that's awesome. So one of the things that we did last year that really helped us this past year was we conducted an online survey to ask the community what is important to them around active transportation. So first of all, why do we do this? Well, as a grassroots advocacy organization, it really helps us to gain an insight from our community on their active transportation behaviors, awareness, challenges, and preferences. And then from that helps guide future active transportation advisory team advocacy and advisory priorities and activities. How did we conduct the survey? Well, the survey was conducted online between July 7th and July 26th. We did limit responses to 1 per computer. And as you guys know, we did quite a bit of outreach within our community. And as Larry pointed out, we actually did reach outside our community. And the reason we did that is we recognize people when they're walking and biking don't stop at the city boundary. And in fact, a lot of our success has been through regional collaboration. We also recognize that a lot of people are choosing to ride their bikes to and through Wheat Ridge. So it's important to us to understand how community members that don't live here but choose to work and play here view our active transportation. So the survey was open to everyone with an interest in active transportation, and we did send emails to all of the city councilors and all of the communication channels we knew to let people know that it was available. And we appreciate those of you who helped spread the word on that. That having been said, to speak to Larry's point, we aren't saying that this survey represents our whole community. The survey represents the 202 people who responded to it, and we recognize it's got a heavy bias towards people who do choose to walk and bike and connect with transit. Reading the comments, I will say it's not 100% of them, But we're not saying that this is representative of all 31,000, but we think that this is a good snapshot of people who are enthusiastic about it. All right, so who did we hear from? 202 respondents, which is up 71% from 2014. We didn't have very many age groups because we didn't want people to feel sensitive about the age question, but we felt it was important to distinguish our aging in place population that the city is actively involved in increasing services for, and then the 26 to 59, which is a lot of newer households and families. So 78% were in the huge age range of 26 to 59, and then 22% were 60 or plus. We had one person who answered the survey who was 25 or younger. So we did try hard to get some kids to answer because their opinion is really important to us, but we weren't very successful. The households of 3 or more represented a slim majority of the respondents. Okay, so a bit more about our participants. 80% of them live in Wheat Ridge. So when we're looking at the numbers, we recognize that about 4 out of 5 of the respondents actually live here. 24% work in Wheat Ridge. 10% attend school in Wheat Ridge. 97% own a car. 88% own a bike. And 15% have a transit pass. And what we see there is people have choices around what modes of transportation they can take. And just about everybody falls in the category of having both a car and a bike. Okay, so one of the first things we were looking at was behaviors. So what did we learn? Well, we learned that people of all ages and abilities are choosing to walk and bike for practical transportation and for personal enjoyment. This graph right here shows a series of questions that we asked: how often people bike to work, bike to school, bike to retail, bike for recreation, walk to the same things, take transit, and then encourage their kids to walk or ride to school. So the darker the green, the more frequent that behavior is. So here's what we learned. At least a few times a month, 28% of the respondents are biking to work. 37% are biking to a retail destination in Wheat Ridge. 68% bike for pleasure or exercise, 44% walk to a retail destination, and 17% of the respondents encouraged their kids to walk or bike to school. This was my favorite. At least a few times a week, 2/3 of our community is choosing to walk for pleasure or exercise. By the way, I'm a pedestrian advocate for a living. Okay, so then we were asking about awareness. So for us, awareness is important because when we're looking at ways to connect the community with city leadership on what's working and what isn't, awareness around what's happening is really critical. So one of the things we learned is it's important and worthwhile to communicate the need for and the value of active transportation policies, priorities, and projects. 71% of the respondents were not aware that approximately 1/3 of Wheat Ridge residents are unable to drive due to age, ability, or income. We felt that was important because just by asking that question, we hope we're raising awareness that when we're talking about active transportation, we're not just talking about the ultramarathoner and the Olympic cyclists. A majority of the people feel there are more people walking and riding bikes in their neighborhoods this year compared to previous years. So we asked people if they said yes to that question, why they thought that was. And here's a good representation of the answers we got. A new influx of younger people moving into neighborhoods, general nationwide trends, awareness, discussion, and infrastructure changes like the Pierce Street bike lane, more biking destinations such as 38th, and then my favorite was, we are aging and know we need to keep moving or we die. But these really actually captured the responses that we got people when we asked why. Also on awareness, we realized that the more outreach and communication, the better understood and supported the different initiatives were. So we asked people about their awareness around several city initiatives, including the Kipling Street Multi-Use Trail, Pierce Street Bike Lanes, 32nd Avenue Bike Lanes, 35th Avenue, Wadsworth Pell, Ward Road TOD, ADA sidewalk ramp, and neighborhood traffic calming. I've shortened some of the labels so they'd fit there. The descriptors were actually a little bit easier, and they also indicated which ones were forthcoming. And what we learned was that at least 50% of the respondents are aware of things that are already happening or really have gotten a lot of attention. 50% of the community had never heard of the proposed 35th Avenue bike lanes, which makes sense because not much has happened with those yet. They're also unaware of the ADA ramp inventory, and there was actually, I was surprised at how few people knew about the neighborhood traffic calming program. What we did learn is that people knew a lot about the programs and initiatives that had a lot of communication and partners that were really communicating. At least 85% of the community was aware of Bike to Work Day, Rigid 38 Criterion, and Live Local Active activities. And all three of those are things that had strong partnerships for outreach and communication. And they've taken place. All right, well then we were interested in what are the barriers that are preventing people from walking and biking as much as they'd like to. We learned that people are aware that walking and biking in our community is well supported in some places, but is challenging in others. So this shows from green, the darker the green, the easier it is. And then when you get to orange, people find it challenging or prohibitive. In general, it actually was pretty encouraging, but 42% of people, both for biking and walking, recognize it's difficult in some places or overall challenging. Transit actually got pretty high rating here with a generally pretty easy to connect with transit, so that's really good. When we ask for open-ended responses, I will follow up and send you guys the full 17-page responses from everybody on our open-ended questions. But I did go through and check references, and there were 102 references to lack of sidewalks and or poor conditions of sidewalks. There were 73 references to lack of bike lanes or inconsistent bike facilities, 39 references to difficult crossings or unsafe intersections, and 23 references to signal timing. You'll enjoy reading through them. People, this year, we had 3 times more people take the time to give us open-ended responses with really specific and quality feedback on things. So it's really helpful when I send that to you guys. You don't want me to go over it tonight. So then we were curious, what are people's preferences when we're looking at limited resources and ability to make priorities? So we gave the community 5 options and asked them to force rank them from 1 to 5. And these are options that we've heard through community members and through city policies and different conversations with city leadership. The thing we learned was that our community wants to make it easier for kids to walk and bike to school, as well as improve access to amenities via active transportation. And this is how that was demonstrated. Number 1, improve safety for kids traveling to school on foot and or on bikes. And that was far and away the number 1 ranking. The number 2 ranking was create additional neighborhood connections to the Clear Creek Trail for pedestrians and cyclists. Number 3 was improve bike and pedestrian travel along 38th Avenue between Kipling and Youngfield. Number 4 was update the bike ped master plan to include priority pedestrian routes for sidewalks. And as you'll see, those 3 are statistically tight, so they're kind of bulked together as far as we see. And then the number 5th priority was improve access on foot on bike to incoming Gold Line commuter rail stations, and that was significantly lower than the preceding 4. And then we were looking at other preferences. So we asked our community how they felt, what we could do and what will make a difference to improve the safety for all modes of travel. And we were really careful in our questions here to make sure we were recognizing we're not just talking about people on bikes and on foot, but also recognizing that safety impacts all road users, including people riding cars. So the number 1 thing, and they could select as many of these as they thought were appropriate. The number 1 was build more single-user facilities to clearly separate cars, people on bikes, people on foot, and people connecting with transit. The second was invest in a community culture that values, encourages, and celebrates all modes of travel. The third was shared road outreach campaign to educate all users on laws governing motorists, cycles, and pedestrians. And the 4th was increase enforcement for all users, including drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. So my favorite statistic of the night is that 87% of the respondents agreed that it's really important that our community is a place where people of all ages and abilities can choose to safely walk, ride, and connect with transit. We also gave them an additional option to ask how many of them would be willing to personally get involved. And about half of the people who said yes to that also said it was something they were willing to support. So that signals to us a community that we heard from, not our overall community, who not only believes it's important, but they're willing to get involved and help make it happen. So, of course, we then ask, what next? Well, from our point of view, we see some quick wins that support the findings from the community survey. Garrison Street from 44th to the Arvada, there are sort of bike lanes there, sort of not, but it's a really strong connection that will support both connection and the incoming rail as well as the Clear Creek. And we think it's a pretty low-hanging fruit in terms of cost and pretty easy to take care of. That also helps support access to a school that's near there. We also see supporting programming and needed infrastructure for safe travel to schools. And Charlie Myers actually heads our Safe Action team and is working in conjunction. He's met with Chief Brennan and others around how we can improve safety for our kids through outreach and through enforcement. But we'd also like to offer more programming to encourage them to walk to school. And then enforcement in school zones and really doing high-profile enforcement when the school year kicks off, to remind our drivers that the little ones are out. We recognize the value of the partnerships, so partnering with media to communicate the current and proposed initiatives, partnering with community partners, which will help increase awareness on the value of active transportation. When we're looking at policy, we really feel strongly that 2016 will be a great year to revise the Bike Ped Master Plan. A couple of reasons for that. Not only was it indicated in what we heard from our community, but Arvada and Lakewood will also be updating their Bike Ped Master Plan next year. So it's a great opportunity for us to do some regional coordination around ensuring that those investments are serving our community, but helping us connect with other communities. And in longer term, what we heard again and again and again, and you guys will see when I send you the results, there's a huge demand for sidewalks, and we recognize that sidewalks are a little bit of a sensitive, I almost want to say situation, but it's you say we want sidewalks, and there's history with sidewalks in Wheat Ridge, and some of it's very recent. So we want to be careful to say that the need for sidewalks is really on corridors that are servicing transit and the amenities that our community needs to be able to have equity of access to services. So we aren't saying that every street in Wheat Ridge needs sidewalks, but we really would like to work with the city on identifying priority corridors and then help bring the support it would take to fund those. So we want to say thank you. This is my walking group from Thursday mornings. We really want to thank you beyond just this fun picture that was on St. Patrick's Day. This city's been really remarkable to work with, and it's really been a joy. There have been moments of cracking teeth for all of us, but it's being noticed, and people are really appreciating it. As you guys know, we have a Facebook page that's pretty active, and in fact, tonight we have a special guest. She's here. She actually lives in Cherry Creek, but found our Facebook group and came tonight because she was curious to hear what we're doing. We have a community that's very actively engaged in the conversation around how we can increase opportunities to walk and bike and connect with transit. And we recognize there's going to be banner years like this year when you guys have doubled the miles of bike lanes in 1 year, pretty much. And we realize there are going to be other years when what we're doing is looking at policies and really trying to come up with longer term plans. So we just want to express gratitude. And thank you guys, and know that we love hearing from you. And when you have questions, it's really great when you reach out to us. And as you know, we will continue to reach out to you. So does anyone have any questions?
Well, I do want to know, do we know some of those people up there?
Ann Brinkman is there, and Millie Nadler.
Very informative. Do we have questions? Mr. Fitzgerald?
Rachel, would you flesh out the word facilities? You mentioned lack of facilities. I'm not really clear what you mean.
Yeah, it's not bathrooms. So facilities, and that's a great question, Tim. I'm glad you asked that, because when I first started the work with LiveWell, I had no idea what that meant either. So facilities means any type of designed infrastructure, and maybe Patrick can clarify any of this, but it's something that distinguishes where bikes and pedestrians should go. So it can be a sidewalk, it can be a trail, it can be a bike lane that's on the street, it can be a sharrow and a sign. So it's something that just designates the use for bikes or pedestrians. Do you think that's about right, Patrick? All right, yeah.
Mr.
Yeah,
Urban?
Zach.
Back to your sort of initial, one of the initial comments that was made regarding the 1/3 of all Wheat Ridge residents who, I'm not sure what the phrasing was, unable to drive, or so is that 1/3 of driving age adults that?
Nope, it's 1/3 of our residents.
So like my 7-year-old daughter, she can't drive, so
She cannot
she's
drive.
included in that.
Yes.
That seems a little bit misleading as far as, did you explain that in the questionnaire as far as this isn't, it would seem shocking to me if 1/3 of all driving adults weren't driving, that would make sense. But when you say 1/3 of all residents, that's a given. I mean, a certain percentage are below 16 years of age. So
Sure.
it just doesn't seem very, I don't know what the word is, but it seems like a statement that it sort of got you, like, oh, well, yeah, I didn't know that, because, of course, if you explain it further, people understand people that are under 16 aren't going to be driving. So it just seemed like that was kind of a miscue there. I don't know. What was the purpose in sharing that information with the respondents, or what was the intent in driving that out?
Sure. So we didn't specify that it was any particular age group because it was representative of all of our residents. And so let me ask you, does your daughter walk?
Yeah,
Does she ride a bike?
yeah,
Yeah. So we want safe places for her to do both. So,
absolutely, and there are.
Yeah. So that's why we include all of our citizens, because in fact, some of the ones that we're not thinking of are the ones that are in most need of that type of investment.
Well, sure, but the way that you phrased it was that 71% of the respondents were surprised to learn that 1/3 of all Wheat Ridge residents aren't driving. Well, if you explained it further and explained, well, that includes people who can't legally get a driver's license, that would, I mean, it sort of takes the air out of that when you say 1/3 of all residents don't drive.
So can you help me understand what you're asking?
Well, I'm just asking, why is that a necessary, it sort of, in the way that you phrased it, it seems sort of like, oh, well, people don't realize that people need bicycles and places to walk. Of course we do. But it just seems like there's a bit of a gotcha statement there by saying 1/3 of all Wheat Ridge residents don't drive. That's because they're being driven by somebody else. So it just seems a little disingenuous.
Okay.
Ms. Davis?
I'll add to that. I guess from a third party answering, not the person that generated the survey. I mean, I could see the purpose of it from the person answering the survey and understanding it. It doesn't say 1/3 of driving age, so it does say 1/3 of Wheat Ridge residents. So it is what it is. So I mean, if someone wants to read into it as driving age, that's them reading into it, but it literally says 1/3 of Wheat Ridge residents, period. So I mean, if you read that sentence like it is what it is. And I think in addition to that, it does make you think about, and especially, folks who, I don't have kids to walk to a bus stop every day and those types of things, it does make you kind of think more about outside of, my circumstances, that there are, children or elderly or the blind or whatever lists you want to put in that 1/3 of Wheat Ridge residents that do need the facilities. Is that right? Facilities to walk or bike and to get around the city. So I'll use the word loaded question. I don't think it's a loaded question because it reads as it is, 1/3 of Wheat Ridge residents. It doesn't say of driving age or anything of that. So I would say from a third party, from someone answering it, I didn't see it that way, at least.
Can I ask you, were you maybe also addressing the fact that the presentation pointed out that there was 70% that weren't aware of that? Is something that maybe would be helpful to explain more to the broader community?
I think that 71%, if you presented the question or the statement that 1/3 of all Wheat Ridge residents don't have either aren't driving, or I'm not sure the exact phrasing, it sounds more salacious than it is. When you explain that I don't know what percentage are below the driving age, well, then it makes more sense that that's the case. But when you say 71% of people aren't aware that 1/3 of residents weren't able to drive, if I'm looking at that, that means that, oh, well, 1/3 of the people that could drive don't drive. That's not the case. They're being driven by somebody else. They're not of legal age to drive, or they choose not to drive. But that's not saying that 1/3 of all Wheat Ridge residents are without a car, or are giving up their car, or are choosing to bike over using a car. So it's that 71% aspect that's being touted as though people aren't aware that 1/3 of our residents don't drive a car. Well, if you extrapolate, if you laid it out for them, it'd be a lot simpler and people would understand that. So that's where, if 71% of the people were surprised by that statement, it tells me that statement wasn't worded properly. That would be what I would say.
Okay, thank you for the feedback.
I've got one more. I do want to jump in on this. It's such fun. Actually, I interpreted it differently. What that meant to me was that there was not awareness of the fact that we need transportation systems other than the automobile, and that was the important part of the statement. It was creating the rest of mobility. Mr. DiTullio, I believe you were next.
So, Rachel, I think my suggestion would be is that when you state that data, that you include a statement in there that includes all ages, because I think if you had mainly adults taking this survey, there could have been the perception that they're talking about all adults. 31% or 1/3 of the city isn't driving, and you have adults filling it out. So I think all you have to do is define your population in your data and say the 1/3 that's not doesn't have access to driving includes all ages from 0 to whatever number. But I think that would clarify it then.
That sounds good. I'll definitely make that adjustment. Thank you.
Mr. Pond.
Thank you for the survey. Thank you for the report. Thank you for everything that AT&AT is doing, actually. And I know we see a lot of you guys, and I know that everyone's working and really passionate about it, and I certainly appreciate it, and I think many of us do. I want to ask just a couple questions on how you view one of the recommendations moving forward, and that is to update the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. So just a couple questions about that. When you look at it, and I've got it pulled open here, do you see an update as an addendum to this, or do you think it's time that we take a fresh look at it in total? Just wondering when you kind of put that out there, what your hopes are as you make that recommendation.
That's a great question. So honestly, I don't have a specific answer, but what we have recognized through our work with the city in the last year, that we have had some change in our demographics, and we've also had some change in other regional corridors, and we've had changes in the own investment we've made within our community. So those have actually impacted people's views on how they get through our community and things they want to get to, and how we can connect better. And there's not, we sort of feel like in some ways the easy work's been done almost, because bike lanes are a lot more affordable to do than sidewalks. And so recognizing that if we are able to do some sort of public process in which we are updating it, whether it's a revision or a revamp, it's an opportunity for people who are in our community now to be a part of that process and help identify what some of those new priorities might look like. So what that looks like from the city's end, I think is better answered by you, but that's where we see that opportunity. And especially given that 2 of our neighboring communities are doing the same next year, and we have been working with them and collaborating with them. So we're really aware of what they're doing, and the more we can work together, the more we can leverage any investments.
Perfect. Well, then I will answer it, because I think actually that I agree with many of your recommendations, but this is the one that I think I feel strongly about and have for more than this year, that it is time to revisit this plan. And in fact, that there's enough that has happened over the 5 or 6 years since this was in formation that it should take kind of a whole new look at it. And in fact, some of the language and some of the things that you're looking at and have presented here don't show up in this plan. And whether it's by age or by modality of transportation, aren't considered in this plan. So I do think actually that it should be looked at. And I also agree that the not only things that we're doing internally drive a lot of that, but also the external connections from the other communities that you've referenced in your survey would even strengthen that for me. So I do hope that we do it. And then I guess the question might go back to staff about, given this recommendation, is there perhaps enough time for us to flesh out some notions about how this could be advanced in the 2016 budget, so we could understand costs as we go forward?
Yeah, I think we have time. We can look into that. I was trying to pull up the website to see if I could see how much it costs to do the plan. George reminded me, I thought it was like 10 years ago. It was only 5 years ago that we did the plan, but if I remember right, it was, I think, 40 to 50,000-ish to do the full plan. But if there's a good chunk of the current plan that can be reused and it's just an update, maybe it's much cheaper than that, but we can look into it.
Yeah, well, I'd appreciate actually kind of looking at that and also continuing to engage the AT-AT group on, again, kind of envisioning what the range of scope of services that should be brought to bear, so that we have something that we can discuss during the budget.
One of the things I'd like to mention is, so Charlie and I are on something called the C3, which is the Creating Connected Communities. And it's a collaborative that was brought together through Bike Jeffco that includes Arvada and Wheat Ridge, and Scott Brink has been participating. And we've just been working together to try and identify how are ways we can better integrate our communities, recognizing they have the incoming rail line, and we've got the Clear Creek and better access to downtown. So there's a lot of mutual benefits. So more regional collaboration and the ability to bring that into a policy document would be really helpful. Also in October, the AT-ATs are partnering with Bicycle Colorado to host the first ever West Metro Active Transportation Summit. And it's a pretty exciting format. You guys will hear more about that. But we recognize that we have the opportunity to really be conveners with our neighbors around better ways to collaborate with resources.
So I'd just say, I'm interested in hearing what other people were saying, but I would look for, after hearing that, if there would be a consensus to ask staff to be able to present something in this year's budget.
We can get back to that. I have two people with questions. Mr. Starker, I believe you were, Ms. Langworthy, you had raised your hand. Mr. Starker, please.
Thank you, Rachel, for putting the survey together and for your report tonight. I'm actually rather buoyed that you had over 200 participants to turn in a survey like this. I think that's a good number. I think it shows the strength of our walking and biking community and the interest that we have in that. Back to this, whether you're surprised at 70% or whatever that we have a third of our 30% of our population that doesn't drive a car or commute by car primarily. I think that sort of goes to the perception that a lot of those people are sort of disenfranchised. Our children are not particularly enfranchised, and yet they really should enjoy the benefits of having a walkable community. I was fortunate enough when I was growing up and going to school that I walked to school, and I would love to be able to provide facilities in our community that would foster that a return to that sort of a condition where school children felt safe and their families felt safe to have them walk to school, that we had the proper facilities and the space to do it, and I think that's good for our community. So I appreciate the efforts that you do. I also would support Mr. Pond's recommendation that we see if we could update the bicycle and pedestrian plan. Not a whole-scale rewrite, but I think if we could bring that up to our current level, that would be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wooden.
First of all, thank you to all the AT-ATs and for all the work they do in our community. It's volunteer time, and these people get together, they plan, they research, they do a lot of work all on their own time. So number one, thank you to that group of people who have devoted that much time and effort to making this a priority for community building and for themselves and how they're going to interact with their community and the structured environment. On the preferences that were listed, the ranking of suggested advocacy priorities, number 3 is actually my number 1, which is 38th Avenue between Kipling and Youngfield. And I fully support finishing sidewalks where we have a lot of bus stops, where there's a lot of pedestrian activity, and fully support looking into that. I know it's going to cost a lot of money. I know there's undergrounding of utility lines, there's drainage issues, but we have a lot of people walking along that particular stretch, and not to say that that is the only stretch in the city, but that particular stretch, and there's kids going along there, and I really believe that's a priority. And I would also support Mr. Pond's suggestion that we relook at the bike ped master plan. I also think it's important for us to look into, and maybe the AT-ATs can help us with this, are national trends. There's a national trend right now that younger people, say, I don't know, 20 to 40s, are rejecting the purchase of vehicles. And they are leaning more towards walking, they're leaning more towards public transportation. And as we build for the city for the future, considering that and what kind of bike facilities, what kind of pedestrian facilities, and what kind of access to transit that'll take people downtown to work is pretty important, because this is a national trend. It's not something just in Wheat Ridge. It is a national trend that people are wanting to not purchase vehicles and find other ways to get around. And I think that's most of my comments, but again, thank you to the AT-ATs.
Can I just want to address something that Jen said. So what's really intriguing to me is you're right. There's a trend with younger generations to postpone purchasing a car, and there's a huge trend of having just one car in a 2-person or more household. But what's really interesting is that trend actually perfectly parallels boomers' transportation preferences. They are prioritizing moving to walkable communities, and they are downsizing the number of cars they have in their homes. So what I love about active transportation policy and activities is a lot of times what works for the millennials works for the boomers. Now, the Gen Xers, we cling to our cars. But so what's great about that statement is what you're recognizing there is actually also something that really supports another significant population that's in our community right now.
I have Mr. Fitz.
I want to thank you again, Rachel, and I want to thank your group for being so positive and helpful in this past year. And I think you're a great example of how citizens can communicate with the city and get things done. So I want to support George's recommendation, but I would like to also add that I would, as one of the priorities, I would like to coordinate with Denver on their 35th Avenue plan to make sure that we are copacetic with their plan, and we decide when it is we have to start budgeting money for 35th Avenue.
And we are. Staff has been attending those joint meetings with Denver on their 35th Avenue bike facility meetings, so we're definitely working on coordinating that. I'm sorry, I did find the price. It was looks like we only spent about $25,000 on the original plan 5 years ago.
I think LiveWell supplemented some of that.
They did.
But the good news is I think a
10,000.
lot of the bulk of that can carry forward because it was just defining and identifying types of facilities. So thank you, Tim.
I have Mr. DiTullio.
So 38th and Kipling West was discussed and brought to a vote to the people a while back. It was a bad time. It was actually in 2008 or 2009 when the economy was low, but it was $12 million back to do that project. And one of the things that we talked about, we didn't want to do just sidewalks because it included drainage and other issues. So if we're going to be looking at this bike pedestrian plan and spending some money on it, I think we should also look at updating the plan for 38th Avenue Kipling West, getting an updated cost, and actually it's never going to be able to be funded through the general fund or public works fund. It's going to have to probably be another ballot question where we look at a bond or a sunsetted bond where you ask the voters for a mill levy increase. So if we're going to just focus on bicycling and master plan, I think we should look at the bigger issue of the drainage in 38th Avenue West. So I would be more willing to do what Mr. Pond has said in conjunction with these drainage projects that need to be looked at and updated, especially 38th Avenue Kipling West. So.
Thank you,
I
Councilman
have
DeTullio.
Mr. Pond, and then I have Mr., well, do you want to?
Given the current status of the ADA audit that we're doing, when is that going to wrap up, or when does that report come out, or how does that?
I think the interns we have hired summer interns to actually walk the city and map our facilities, and I believe Scott said they're wrapping that up here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm hoping, I don't know, I don't have a date on the, it'll be before the end of the year, I'm assuming.
I would just be cautious of going forward with any kind of bike and pedestrian master plan without that information ahead of that discussion, because that's what will tell us specifically where we actually need to put resources to make things ADA accessible versus how does NSA fit into the bike and pedestrian master plan. I don't want to go forward with that until we've got the ADA part down and taken care of, and that would be my perspective.
Mr. Pond,
Well,
please.
so I'll just respond to both of those comments, but I think I agree. The reason why, actually, if I can just be a little bit more clear about what I was saying before, that I think this is more than a mere update, is because if there is a fault, and I think it's a good document, but if there's a shortcoming of the document previously, it is that it doesn't actually perhaps reference some of the other guiding documents that are meaningful, like the things we're talking about with the dirt task force, et cetera, because there's a synergy between those things. And so I agree. I think that if again, I want to move forward with this. I think it's a little bit more than a mere fluffing up what was done before. I think it does need to pull in some of the things that have come up between now and then, but also it should cross-reference some of the things that you're talking about for sure, because otherwise I think it makes it difficult to prioritize in a more complete sense some of these corridors, because there are some challenges. Obviously, it's easy to say that's our number one priority, but there's other documents, there's other guiding, there's other constraints that we're also working on, and I think that we should connect the documents a little bit more. And frankly, I think that's in the heart of what this group has been bringing forward, that this is part of the fabric of our community, just like stormwater is, and let's kind of get all of this right. So I agree with what you're saying. I think that we should update this, but it should pull in some of these other things.
So we're moving along from a bike ped update to a more comprehensive looking at all the other possibilities. Ms. Davis, did you want to add something?
Well, I'm following with what George had said and Mr. DeTullio, and I do think it's like three pieces to the puzzle, which is even Mr. Urban, the ADA compliance portion of it, the water and drainage issues, and then also the transportation.
And we did already get direction from y'all to look at drainage and bring that discussion back at a study before the budget. So that's on the docket. We don't have a date yet, but.
Mr. Chulio?
Well, I would agree that we did give that direction, Patrick, but I think that it's been a high priority for years, even when that was like in 2010, that 38th Avenue Kipling West has been always kind of percolating to the top. So I think that should get the highest priority first, because that's the biggest stretch. It's probably the most expensive. It has major drainage problems and sidewalk problems, and you probably could look at bike lanes on that section if you wanted. So there's a lot of good possibilities. So I would suggest that one percolate to the top just because of past history and comments tonight, and I think it's the most important probably of all of this right now, if that's possible.
Do we need any further, are you good enough? Do we have enough of a consensus that we're looking at the total problem is what we're doing before the budget, and then decide it's too expensive? Any other comments? Nope.
Can I add one thing I forgot? Well, I didn't forget, but I didn't have all the data. We had volunteers covering 36 hours worth of bicycle and pedestrian counting last week. Charlie did it. I did a couple shifts. And it's really baseline data, but what we did is we did 35th and Pierce, where we recognize we've got new facilities coming in. We did 32nd and Kipling, where we see we have 2 new facilities coming in the next year. We did 38th and Kipling to get a baseline on both the multi-use trail to track Discovery Park usage, and with the hopes that 38th Avenue west of Kipling comes in. And then we also did 44th and Field to see how people are connecting with Anderson Park from the community. So there's not much really to do with it other than to know we're going to repeat it next year, and we used a national standard for tracking and reporting. So we'll provide that to you guys after we finish getting all of our sheets back, and then we're going to report it nationally as well. And then we'll do it again next year. So thank you.
Let me say that as a volunteer group, you have done a very professional job. I think it's been mentioned more than once, but I am really awestruck by it, and as well as the regional connections that you're making, et cetera. I think that we've made a good investment here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you to your team, too.
And I have stickers and magazines for people.
Stickers, wow. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 3. Citywide PIO position. Looks like a big one.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. We have Chief Brennan and Heather Geyer here, Administrative Services Director, and we had an opportunity to, anytime we have a kind of a vacancy in a position or through attrition or other reasons, we take a hard look at it and see if we need to maybe refocus the efforts of that position into some different arenas to address current needs, and that's why we're here tonight. The chief had a position in the police department that he's wanting to adjust, and it could have an impact on Heather's department. So we're here to speak to that, and the chief is going to start, I think.
Thank you. So we want to talk tonight about really 2 positions. One is in the police department, the position that was formally described as the PIO training coordinator position, and then a city PIO position. So if I could give you just a little bit of history about the PIO position in the police department. Public information officers, really started to see those, particularly in law enforcement in the mid-'80s, early 1990s. And it was law enforcement's way of trying to address and respond to inquiries from our traditional media sources. So you had the print media, which I think most of us would say in the 1980s and 1990s was a pretty robust industry. You had the radio industry, and you also had the TV industry. And some departments created press information officers or public information officers, and they used existing sworn positions to do that. They would put a person in that position. Some departments spread that out amongst staff, so they would use like their management team or command team to deal with those press inquiries. And you started to see some departments civilianize those positions and actually look to the media sort of environment for people who worked in that field that came into it. So if you just think about some of the notable radio and TV personalities that today currently are working as press information officers for various law enforcement agencies. You have Lynn Kimbrough, who worked at KOA with Steve Kelly for years and years doing the morning show, and she worked at Lakewood PD for a number of years and now works for the Denver DA's office. You've also got the person who's currently Golden's communication manager, and she was a former reporter for Channel 7.
and did that for those folks. You've got some folks with the Denver Police Department that had some exposure to the media world. But Wheat Ridge took the model, and at the time, just because of the kinds of cases we had, to use the management team as essentially our PIOs. So whenever we would have an incident that rose to the level of interest from the press, we had an on-duty commander who assumed that role would be the first to interact with the press, and then later in the week, if that was continuing, let's say it was a homicide or a sex assault, where you just had continued press interest, then the chief might assign a person who was working close to that case who could be that contact for the press. In the other position that a police department had at the same time as this PIO position was a training coordinator position. And that training coordinator position was the person who was responsible. It was a sworn position, so it was a police officer that was in that position. And they were responsible for managing all of the training functions in the police department. So training of officers is a critical piece of what we do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year perspective. And the requirement that we keep track of training, the types of training, we keep those records and document those is really important from a risk management perspective for the police department and for the city if we get into a liability situation. So in 2002, prior to 2002, that position was civilianized. And in 2002, Lisa Stiegel, some of you remember Lisa Stiegel, Lisa Spinder, was a civilian training coordinator for the police department. And Lisa had a pretty high skill set. She was what I would call a high growth individual, had a good skill set and wanted to take on more responsibility within the police department. So the police department provided her some training and eventually moved the PIO piece of what the management team was doing over to her. And when I came on board in 2005, she was referred to as the PIO training coordinator. Her job description didn't reflect that, so I had some work to do to make sure it reflected the job that she was doing. But she became a very effective PIO, very well known in media circles. She was very reliable, very professional, did a good job. She left our organization in 2012, like a lot of high growth people do. She wanted to do more and more, and there just wasn't an opportunity to give her, the kinds of things that she wanted to do. So she went to work for a national car dealership, providing training for all of their employees in California and Colorado. So we reevaluated that PIO training coordinator position, and it was pretty apparent to us that we were starting to fall behind a little bit in terms of how we were marketing the police department from a Facebook perspective, a Twitter perspective, YouTube perspective. We were way behind where other departments were in terms of both how we marketed ourselves as an agency, how we monitored those particular social media sites to see both the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak, of what was being told about this police department or this city. And so we wanted to hire a person who had a skill set in social media that could help get us up to speed, and we brought John Romero on board. So John was a former reporter for Colorado Springs news station, certainly understood the TV world, a pretty good background in social media, did a lot of work for us from a YouTube perspective in making videos, talked about, described the kinds of things we did as a department. I'd say overall it was pretty successful. We did a really good job of marketing the PD, but that skill set, that PIO skill set, didn't really align with what we needed from a training coordinator position, and so we had some issues that arose in terms of how we managed that piece. And then because of John's work here, he got an opportunity to go to work for a nonprofit in an area he was pretty passionate about, and he left. And so it gave me the opportunity to sort of look at that position, that PIO training coordinator position, and say, are these two skill sets, the skill set that we need for a PIO in 2015, from a dealing with, the press, whether it's the print, radio, or news media, and also having a strong social media presence and being able to get our message out to our community members that use those sites. Is that skill set, did it really align with the skill set that we require of a training coordinator, which is more of an administrative kind of perspective in terms of record keeping and those kinds of things. And then I had an issue as well with how we were doing our national accreditation process. That process is changing, it's evolving, different kinds of requirements, and when you matched up the skill sets for an accreditation manager and a training coordinator, those skill sets really have more in common than they have skill sets that aren't in common, and the PIO piece of that job description was really kind of an outlier in terms of what we looked at. So we went through a process internally of redoing that job description to align it to be a training accreditation coordinator position. And it's pretty similar to positions that we see in other departments that are our size or smaller. Golden has a very similar position, training coordinator, accreditation coordinator position that they have. And so we worked with MSEC to align that position from a salary perspective. And then we started to have the discussion with city admin in regards to, is there a need for a citywide PIO position that can promote the interests of the city and the police department, be there when the police department has a crisis and emergency, where we need a public face, to speak to the media from a police department perspective, and also help us manage, our social media sites. So for the PD right now, our website, we try to use to push information out. We use a Facebook page. We have a next door neighbor account, so we can manage and watch those accounts. We look at other Facebook pages because there's quite a bit of information sometimes that is posted. People don't call 911 or the police department as much anymore about some issues they posted on Facebook. So, Councilmember DeTulio sent us a number of posts that he's picked up on different Facebook accounts. We try to watch those, but it's really hard to do that when you have people that are doing a variety of other jobs as well from a management perspective. So in working with Heather, we think we've come up with a pretty good plan to look at turning that old police department position into a training and accreditation coordinator position, and then creating a new position, which would be sort of a city communications manager, PIO, that would work both for the city and also the police departments, both on your traditional media kinds of stories, but also marketing the city, marketing the PD, and managing and watching the various social media sites that we have. And I'll let Heather pick up on this as well. So Heather.
Thanks, Chief. When the chief came to me and tossed the idea out in terms of looking at this creative approach, I said, absolutely, I have a need to continue to maintain what we've established already from a communications infrastructure perspective, and there's so much more that we can do, and I think that's where this combined position really offers value. In particular, from a streamlined perspective, when you have one individual who has a pulse on everything that's happening within the city from a communications perspective, versus when you have that extra layer of coordination and logistics between two individuals. So what I tried to do in the portion of the staff memo from the city perspective is tell the story of where we came from. I started with the city back in 2006 as an assistant to the city manager / PIO. I've been here going on 9 years. And so over this course of time, we've done a lot, all things considered, when you look at other organizations, especially our neighboring organizations, Golden, as the chief mentioned, Arvada, Lakewood. we do a lot communications-wise on the minimal staffing level we have and the minimal investment that we have in our communications programming. So I really tried to draw a historical snapshot of what we've done over time, and I hope you had an opportunity to look at those milestones that we've hit every year, you know, starting from 2007 when we launched the brand, which was a recommendation out of the neighborhood revitalization strategy. And then we've kept building through the launch of a new website. And here we're in 2015, and we're talking about the redesign of the city website. So we're really excited about this position, and I think you know, the combined PIO position is a reflection of our high performance culture. You know, both the chief and I do not have the amount of work that we can really justify to have two individual PIOs within our respective departments. So we think that this position is really the right thing to do for the organization. Our citizenry has changed over time in terms of the demand and desire, from my perspective, to be engaged within our community and wanting the tools for engagement. Again, there's so much more that we can do from a communications perspective. We talk about Facebook, we talk about Nextdoor. You probably, if you subscribe to Congressman Perlmutter's updates, saw that he's having a Twitter conversation. It's those types of tools that we can use. We need staff to assist with deploying those tools, as well as maintaining what we already have. We can't continue to do what we're doing on the staffing level that we have. In the memo, we point out the partnership that we have with Lou Stasco and the Stasco Agency, which has been hugely successful for the city of Wheat Ridge. If you haven't had a chance to read your email today, we have two features in the 5280 magazine, which is huge, and you really need to be proud of that. First time ever for the city of Wheat Ridge, and thanks to Lou and her team and our partners at Wheat Ridge 2020, as well as several members within the city of Wheat Ridge to help make the feature on the Wheat Ridge Greenbelt, as well as several restaurants on Ridge at 38. So the value that we've received from a publicity perspective is exponential, and I think we've got a lot of momentum, and we have an opportunity to continue to build on that momentum moving forward. So as we've pointed out in the staff memo, fortunately with attrition and some salary savings that's resulted from that, the chief and I have funds in the 2015 budget to go ahead and hire a PIO this year. You know, it'd be great if we could hire the person tomorrow, but it'll probably take at least a month and a half to get somebody on board. And then this would be an increase in an FTE to this year's budget, and you'd see that reflected in the 2016 proposed budget when that comes forward in September. And so without diving too much into the background materials that I provided to you, I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have on those materials.
The question I had is, if we go with a full-time PIO, which I think we've talked about in the past, that made more sense to have one as PIO citywide, but do we have to still stay with the consulting firm and be paying twice? What can we take this person and have them person take over the public, the PR?
Yeah, what we've recommended is that you'll see a reduction in the PR firm contract. I still think that there's value in continuing that relationship. What Lou Stasco brings to the table is different than what any government PIO could bring to the table. Lou is a publicist. She's well known within the region, the state, and she has connections. And she's able to talk with the media in the way that I cannot talk with the media. You know, I'm viewed as the government PIO. I work for the government. And, you know, that's a reality that I can't change. As much as I try to influence and push positive stories out there, it's there. Lou has the ability through her connections and the work that she does to be very effective with media pitches. The 5280 feature, perfect example. We've also received numerous features in the Denver Business Journal, online Denver Business Journal outlets, blogs, Denver Post on the regional level that in the past have been very difficult to secure, but we've been able to successfully do that with Lou. So currently Lou's contract is around $60,000, and what we're recommending is to reduce that to $36,000 for 2016 fiscal year, and then we'll reallocate the $24,000 difference to this PIO position.
Ms. Davis?
So I have just a couple questions. So when did Nate leave?
Nate left in December.
So I guess, is this, I know we said it's an additional FTE, but really would it be if you consider Nate, because you didn't replace Nate, right?
Let me explain how that works. Nate was assistant to the city manager, so that's one FTE. This would be an additional FTE because the assistant to the city manager position is currently an interim management analyst position, and that position's filled with Carly Lorenz, who's sitting right over here. She is, this was part of our succession planning efforts, completely different position. And I know that sometimes it's easy to kind of get them mixed up and they seem a little blended, and that's really a reflection of the all hands on deck approach that we've had to take to be successful within the communications area. So when it comes to a groundbreaking event, say for Perrins Row, it's me, it's Steve, it's Carly, it was Nate, it was Karen Vannert, all taking tasks to make that event successful. Same with Kipling Ridge. So from the management analyst perspective, we have had to put on the priority-based budgeting on hold this year. There was an interim period of time from the time that Nate left to the time that Carly came back from maternity leave that I had a gap in the ability to keep things moving. That also impacted the aging needs plan, which was probably, say, 80% done, but I've had to set that aside at this point in time until I'm able to reprioritize some other needs in order to get that back on track.
Okay, so
and just two examples. I have
a
others.
couple thoughts by looking at this, because I think every one of us in every one of our worlds are being told do the same or more with less. I mean, it happens to everybody. And I guess one, and I'll just some questions or just some comments. I don't know that they have to all be answered, but I'm curious of why it wouldn't report to you versus the police department, because it does sound like the majority of it is, I'll just say a few of these out loud and then you can respond or choose, but it just, a lot of it is more, I would say, global versus police department specific. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious about that. And then some of this, I feel like I look at the ribbon cutting, but I know some of the smaller ribbon cuttings we went to, like a third-party group came and did that for us. So it's like, wait a minute, you rocked a couple really good ribbon cuttings, but it was the bigger ones. But then some of the smaller ones, like Fido's and things like that, did not come from our city. And then my other thought is some of this with the volunteer support and some of those items are kind of being supported by Wheat Ridge 2020. So, or I guess I'm making up that some of this stuff is, being marketed and communicated by the resources we've given Wheat Ridge 2020. So just in looking at this, it causes me a little pause, because I'm a budget neutral person, and if we can stay budget neutral and we say we're not hiring this person but we're going to do this instead, I'm okay with it. But I understand there's a need and we need to do those things, but I also feel like there's some people that are picking up some of this work, some of it better than others. I know that like the website really needs done, and a lot of times, like when it came to like the renewal Wheat Ridge stuff, a lot of that stuff wasn't updated. And, so I know that there's probably is a gap there that someone needs to kind of pay more attention to it. So that's just kind of me thinking out loud. But I do, one of my bigger things is I see that it's reports to the police department, but I see it just seems like 75% of the work is not the police department, except for if we have, a shooting or, and some of that other stuff. So just talking out loud and my thoughts.
Thank you. Let me tackle the latter two, and then we'll go to the question about the reporting relationship and what we have proposed. The smaller ribbon cuttings are a joint effort with the city and the Wheat Ridge Business Association. And over the past year, we've relied on the Wheat Ridge Business Association. Thankfully, Cheryl Brungart was willing to take that and move forward with organizing those ribbon cuttings. There were a lot of behind-the-scenes work that the public doesn't see, nor do each of you see, that goes on to make those ribbon cuttings happen. The media advisories that we push out all come from the city. That's something that the city took on about a year ago in order to help make those ribbon cuttings more successful. Pushing out the press release and really pitching the events to Austin with EuroHub, and then the transcript, Neighborhood Gazette, sending pictures after the fact, because time is limited and sometimes the reporters can't send someone out there, whether it be a photographer or a reporter. And so we've built a relationship with the local media to where we can get space in those publications or the online version of those publications, which has been really successful. I think, there's something to be said in terms of how much you ask volunteers to do. And I think we're at a point as a city where, some of our volunteers are a little burned out. And, we try to do our best in terms of streamlining our approach to getting information out there, but it takes coordination. It takes persistence in calling business owners and, number one, encouraging them to have an event, and then the logistics involved in executing that event. And I know that the business owners really appreciate it. And because of the increased number of businesses that we have coming into Wheat Ridge, or businesses that want to do re-grand openings, we've seen an increase overall in that activity. So while they're not as grand of a scale as, say, the Kipling Ridge or the Perrins Row groundbreaking ceremonies, they're still a really important part of the city's economic development efforts and outreach efforts to the community. In terms of, the gaps in service with website and so forth, I'm not sure I can really say enough. I could go into a list of things that aren't getting done on that I have and would like to do. And I think when you look at the gaps and, we do things really well. Could we do things better? Absolutely. And then when you look at those from just a communications perspective, and then what I'm not getting done from a department director perspective, those are significant. There's major citywide all enterprise initiatives that I need to be leading and championing as a department director that I have very little time to do. And I don't have staff, I don't have the depth within my department where I can say, here, take this, you champion this and execute it. Just doesn't happen that way. And we're talking about projects such as moving our payroll in arrears. We pay current in order to execute electronic timesheets, which is an initiative that the police department would love my department to get on board with. We have to change the way we pay. And projects like that require time and attention, and they don't happen overnight. It takes months of planning to make those types of initiatives come to fruition. So going back to the first question about the reporting relationship, this is something that the chief and I recognize that is unique to this position. I think from my perspective, it's important, and I know that I have a great working relationship with the chief, and I think that we can co-manage this individual. It may seem a little odd on the outside, but I think that it's important for the individual when reporting to a police chief and the work that they'll be doing from a public information officer perspective, that they have that reporting relationship as well as a reporting relationship on the city side. So while it's uncommon, it's kind of a hybrid approach, but you know, it's certainly something that if the chief and I needed to tweak things, we'll certainly do that along the way.
It's just, I read it right, it didn't say co-manage.
Yeah, both the job description and the staff report say the person will report to the chief and the admin services director.
Well, it was like a direct to you and indirect to...
Indirect to me, I think.
Yeah, indirect to the city manager.
So it didn't... Okay, I didn't read it that way, if that's how it worked out.
That's how we're going to try to make it work.
Okay.
And then to just for a minute to touch on your issue of the budget, I think as department directors, we're all uniquely sensitive to the community that we work in and the budget, and that we have a responsibility to be prudent and wise with that. I think the challenge comes when the world around us is changing. So 10 years ago when I became the police chief, we didn't have a vibrant website. People a lot of people were just getting into the internet, and now the social media world has exploded. So from a social media perspective, if there is something going on out there that is about this police department and it's either really, really negative or it's really positive, we need to be aware of that and on top of it. And it's difficult to ask my managers, who should be, are in charge of divisions and providing that line level kind of boots on the ground kind of approach to try to keep their eyes on the social media world. And you've seen changes in certainly the public and the private sector when it comes to how they're trying to market and communicate the good things organizations are doing. And I certainly see it a lot from a law enforcement perspective and looking at how our neighbors from a national basis, how departments are doing that. And I think it's critical to our success as a city that we recognize that and how that world is evolving and changing, and that we try to stay current with it to the best degree that we can. So we certainly know bringing this forward to you, we're not doing it lightly. We think it's a critical need.
Okay, I had Jen, and then I have Mr. Stark.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I'm missing it in here, but do you have an estimated percentage of what department? Is it going to be 50-50, or what percent do you think this person will be working, or is it a fluid dynamic going there?
I think it's going to be fluid. To start, I think that Heather and I and this person in this position will be meeting a lot to sort of talk about priorities and what needs to happen. I know if we have a homicide or we have a situation like we had yesterday morning where a DUI driver crashes into a patrol car and injures 2 officers, and we have a vehicular assault, they're going to be PD focused, which is where we're going to need that focus because it's a crisis situation. And other times it's probably going to be a balance, and it may fall out to, different percentages in regards to what they're doing. But I think the critical piece of that is Heather and I working together effectively to sort of outline what we want our priorities to be and what we want them to work on.
Okay, thank you. And just a couple more comments regarding the Stasco agency and the reduction in their budget. I very much appreciate looking at that and looking at probably how this person can effectively work with the Stasco agency on a more limited basis and still get the same amount, if not more, work done. So another comment about what the chief already mentioned is that we do live in a different world right now, that things are different. Things move very quickly, especially in the information age, and especially in the information social media arena, and that having a person experienced and able to understand that area, understand how that works, and to effectively promote the city and respond to incidents that might happen is very important, that we have an experienced person in this particular position and not other staff people who may not know these skills full-time, that we do have a professional in this area. I think that's really important in today's world. Earlier this year, I got to hear the Chief of Police of Washington, D.C., and I was amazed to hear how much that department uses social media to communicate with their citizens, that they use Twitter a lot, and they are effectively using that as a way to communicate with citizens who don't have other ways to communicate with the police department. So there are ways that a public information officer can really be effective and set up systems within a city that would really help a city overall. And that we are competing with our neighbors. We're competing with our citizen, Arvada, Lakewood, Golden. We're competing with other areas for publicity, and I hate to put it like that, but it's true. And for Wheat Ridge to be noted in 5280, Denver Post, Denver Business Journal, that's really important, not only to bring the kind of citizens that we say we want, but also the kind of businesses that we say we want. So keeping that communication out to the bigger world is very important, and I support your proposal, and I think it's very important that we get a professional in this position, and I appreciate all the work you've done.
And Mr. Starker next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Heather and Chief, for this proposal. I was a little short on knowledge, I guess. What was happening with the training coordinator, accreditation manager? Do you think this is still a sworn position, or is this, and it sounded to me more like not a sworn position, more of a librarian, an administration position. And I was wondering what the cost implications of that were if it was not a sworn position, and trying to balance that into what I think is an important information officer.
Sure. So it's not a sworn position. It would be a professional staff position, just like it is today. We don't see we don't see with the additional adding the duties of being an accreditation manager as well as the training coordinator duties, that the salary in that position increasing. We see it staying in the same salary range that it is right now, salary range 220. It'll require a degree for that particular position, and administrative skills certainly, and record keeping and certifications and those kinds of things.
Okay. And then is it fair to think about this information officer as, and not to diminish your department, Chief, but I mean, we've got public works and we've got parks and we've got other things that happen in our city on a broad-based thing. And this information officer would be charged with, in general, raising the positive profile of our city, and keeping tabs on, on the activities that were going out there, and be able to interpret that and explain that to the public. Is that kind of what we're looking at here?
Absolutely. It's certainly the PD has a PIO requirement. I think everybody knows what that is because we see it when we watch the news or listen to the news, see it on social media. But I think the other aspect is, how do we raise the profile of the city as a whole? And Heather's done, I think, a great job in the role that she's had. But we can do better, and I think we can do better with that position. I'll let Heather speak to that as well.
I absolutely agree. If you asked me what my wish list was to do certain things, I'd rattle things off such as, implementing MyMixer, which is a technology that allows you to have telephone online meetings with community members, which allows you to engage a population that we don't currently engage if they don't choose to come to community meetings. You've got the Nextdoor technology, which we haven't launched. Development of a formal communications plan, which was outlined in the staff memorandum, is something that I think is a natural next step for Wheat Ridge to take, given where we're at today and what we've been able to accomplish thus far. An open budget platform is something that Larry has championed this year, and that we're including in the budget for FY 2016. There's definitely a public information crossover with launching that type of budget transparency project, which I think, again, is a natural next step for the city of Wheat Ridge. However, we need support. We need a PIO to help champion these initiatives and bring these forward.
And as I understand it, then if we were to have a PIO to leverage all of these other facets that we could do, that would free you and your office up to do more sort of hardcore administration and other services for our citizens?
Yes, I would still be involved from a higher level perspective, and the chief and I have talked about having weekly meetings with the PIO. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot more that we can do from just an organizational development perspective within the city of Wheat Ridge. I mean, we have an aging workforce, so workforce planning, succession planning is a topic that we really need to start wrapping our arms around. The citywide initiatives that I mentioned earlier in terms of changing the way we pay. There's other, I've got an employee who's planning on retiring next September. Unfortunately, she's told me pretty far in advance, so I can start putting together a succession plan for that individual in the finance division. Individual has a huge amount of institutional knowledge, so replacing that employee is going to be difficult, and it's going to require the time to take, it's going to require us taking the time to make sure we make the right hiring decision, and then there's overlap for training purposes. So there's a lot that happens within an administrative services department, which sometimes is hard to explain to the public because you're not talking about parks, you're not talking about roads, you're not talking about the police department, but it's you're talking about all of the behind the scenes systems that help make the city run.
Thank you.
Mr. Tertulio? Oh, you had first.
I'll go ahead.
First of all, thank you for presenting the information the way you did. I really appreciate all the sort of the background as to what's going on. I guess my main concern, and I'd be very much in favor of having an information officer for the city, and much for the same reason that a lot of other organizations have that, and that we have to create our own content and our own sort of voice in the community, or else no one will hear us. And so I think that position could fulfill that. I guess my concern is in duplicating those efforts through the work of the current PR firm. I would be much in favor of going fully to the POI versus doing it part with this PR firm and part with a staff person. So I would rather do away with the PR firm if we're going to go forward with the PIO, but to have both, it just seems somewhat of a duplication. I understand the stated reasons why the PR firm was hired, but I would think that if we have a PIO, it would be in their purview to decide how that goes forward and whether or not that we would need a PR firm to facilitate whatever they're not able to accomplish. But to start off the gate with a PR firm sort of tagging along, so to speak, it would sort of hinder that person in that role, and I would rather it be either one or the other, but not both.
Mr. Tertulio?
So what I noticed in the past was when we had Lisa doing the PIO for the police department and we had you doing the PIO for the city, a lot of information was getting out to the public and the press. I think that was good. And then it seemed to fall off because we had you doing other duties, and then we had Lisa doing other duties, and then John Romero came on. And so to me, it seems like the communication out from the city has gone down quite a bit over the last 2 or 3 years for various reasons, staffing or whatever. So all I'm looking for is that we can go back to the point where we had consistent, regular updates from the city about city projects, city issues, police reports or police information, so that. And what I don't understand is, I think we cut the budget from Wheat Ridge 2020 for marketing and communication. I seem like we got too many people doing the same job, and I'd like to see it come back to where we had one person doing the job for the city and getting the information out. I understand the need for that PR firm, but if we can scale back that cost, like you were talking about, and actually having more of this PIO doing that work, it seems to me that I'd rather pay somebody more here and have them have a more robust position and then not have 2020 doing the information and another PR firm. It seems that you have too many people doing the same job. So did we cut the 2020 budget last year? I think we did, didn't we?
You didn't approve a request that a new request they had asked for. I think they were going to hire a full-time communications person. They still you'll see it in the budget when you get it here in a few weeks. But they're asking for still some of their marketing dollars that they use on an annual basis. And it is a little different. I understand why you say that, and we look at it very closely too. And ask Britta, it's like, well, is this something that we're already doing, and so we can have a further discussion about that. But their communication dollars are pretty specific to marketing of the city from economic development and tours and for realtors and new citizens and stuff. But I think it's something we can definitely look at and make sure it's not being duplicated.
Yeah. So my concern would be this: that we can consolidate this so we're not just wasting money on communication. The other thing is, I would hate to make a decision tonight. I think that one of the things I've seen with for example, the Jeffco School Board, they're supposed to hear something one night and then make a decision the next meeting. And so what I'd like to do is see this move forward to maybe the next meeting on August 10th, and then actually have a shorter discussion, maybe answering some of the questions you've heard tonight, maybe cleaning up the information on the budgets for everybody else, and then maybe have it as a regular agenda item at a city council meeting.
Yeah, we plan to bring it back for formal approval.
I have Mr. Fitzgerald over there.
I'm very supportive of this proposal. I think Jen hit a very important point, and that is that communicating with the public is changed. The press plays a less important role than they once did, and direct communication through media is probably becoming as important as the press, and we absolutely need that. And one example of this, and this is not criticism, Heather, one example is we have the city has a Facebook page, and there's not a single thing on it. So that's because the stuff that was on there was some stuff on there, but it timed out. I guess it's too old to be on there anymore. So I am very supportive of this. As far as working with Stasco, I think that if it is the PIO's job to decide how to manage this, we should let them try and work out a cooperative agreement to begin with and see how they do cooperate, and then we can cut our contract with Stasco out at a later date. If we don't need them, there's no reason to have them, but we don't know that yet. We have to see how our public information officer does. So I would recommend that we keep our half contract with Stasco as proposed. And if people are ready for a consensus, I will ask for a consensus.
I think Mr. Starker wanted to speak.
I was just going to kind of echo the points that Mr. Fitzgerald made. I think I think a PIO would be good for the city. I think you could reduce the Stasco contract, but not eliminate it completely. And let's see what the PIO how they can leverage that, and then we can see if we're able to reduce those consultant costs, so much the better. It may be that they have Stasco Group has a particular expertise and gets us places that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do, but it's somewhat dependent upon what individual you fulfill in the PIO role as to how you would manage those consultant services. So I'd be ready for consensus.
I want to add something here too. Is that as you said, it's the contacts that the PR firm has that are so valuable to get us into the level of literature that we have been in. That has brought us a lot of notoriety, and I really would not like to lose that because we're riding high as far as our own development, brought on so much by that professionalism. When I read through what the new person would have to have, I'm trying to think what it's called, the draft, a lot of professionalism, a lot of training, a lot of capacity, and she'll be, I said she, it doesn't necessarily mean she, that's a typical thing. He or she will be, I think, very busy. So there was I
would ask then for a consensus that we move forward as proposed.
show of hands, or did you two, we're voting on, okay. All right, which we'll then see it at a regular meeting then. Okay, thank you very much, Heather. Which moves us on to item number 4, construction activities.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a quick discussion item here tonight to get further direction from council. If you read your memo, it's pretty self-explanatory, but Ken Johnson put this together. He couldn't be here this evening, but we currently do not have adopted regulations pertaining to hours of work in our code. We periodically get complaints and calls and questions, and when people call, we say, well, we don't have hours, particular hours in our code to enforce. We can enforce specific noise as a nuisance in our nuisance code, but we can't enforce it as most cities do have in a code in their building code. There's some examples in here of some of our surrounding cities and what they do. Lakewood, Arvada, Denver all have something in their codes that restrict hours, all pretty similar between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m.-ish. 9 p.m. seems to be the latest, and 6 or 7 a.m. is the earliest for the different cities. So we would just like some direction from you. If this is something you would like us to bring back, we can do a little bit more research on maybe what other cities are doing, and bring back an ordinance for further discussion.
They're jumping in. Ms. Davis.
My 2 cents, I would support something similar to Denver's, because I mean, if you have someone in your house cutting tile in your garage and isn't making noise, they wanted to start at 7, hats off to them. But I do like how they had that there's a sound threshold between a certain amount of time, so it doesn't limit somebody, coming in your house and working and really not making noise in the neighborhood.
I think we looked at, could the chief want to add to that?
So Denver actually uses sound measuring devices. We do not. We rely on a reasonableness standard. So if it, yeah, so to the extent we can.
Yes, so similar language.
Yes.
Okay.
So.
Mr. Starker.
So the one that gets to me is sort of the beeping on the beeping of a backing up front end loader or a backhoe, and I guess that to me is sort of the sound threshold if it was next door. Mm-hmm. I think it can be reasonably aggravating, and then the other thing is this 7 days a week, or do they address the days of the week, and is there a Sunday exception, or?
I don't know if Ken specified in here. I was assuming it was 7 days a week, but that's something we could look into, and obviously you guys can have more discussion about that. I think we need to be pretty sensitive, though, to our construction folks and activities, especially during the summer. If there's a rainy season, then once it starts drying up, they want to work and they want to get done, as you know. But we need to balance that with our neighborhoods and being respectful of our neighborhoods. So I think we just.
And I think maybe that goes to the reasonableness standard also.
Yeah.
So I would look to that. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. DiTullio.
So I know our noise ordinance talks about a time range of 7 to 11, generally.
So that is for garbage?
No, for the noise ordinance, 7 to 11.
That's the piece that speaks to us. Our general noise ordinance is during any time of the day. If you look at subsection A, if you get down to subsection D, it talks about noise from garbage delivery pickup. So you could disturb somebody's peace at 11 a.m. in the morning if the sound emanated beyond 25 feet and was reasonably, disturb somebody else, unnecessarily disturb somebody else, I think is the language.
So why can't, when this happened, like I think it was around 44th Avenue or some of that area where there was construction were making noises before 7 a.m., why, when they were called, why couldn't code enforcement or the police department issue a citation or a ticket for noise that was unreasonable based on the data? Why?
So you need a witness. You need somebody that's going to sign the citation. You can't disturb a police officer's peace. So we generally ask for a person to sign that citation. I can't speak specifically to the 44th Avenue.
As an example.
As an example, but because I didn't go out on the call, so I don't know what all the dynamics of that ended up being. But generally, in noise ordinance kinds of things, a person has to have their peace disturbed, so they have to be willing to, be the victim on that citation and show up in court. When they don't want to do that, we'll go out and talk to whoever's causing that noise and warn them.
So who's going to enforce this? Code enforcement or community development or police?
It'll probably be a police department. It'll probably fall under, our current noise ordinance and just put some teeth around, construction activities.
So then if you get a complaint, you don't need a person to sign a complaint. The police can actually see it and say you're working in the wrong
No,
hour.
we need the person to sign the complaint. We can certainly warn somebody. Right now, there's nothing
No,
to
I mean,
warn anybody on.
if this passes.
Yes, we still need a person who's willing to step forward to say that their peace was disturbed. I can't testify to peace being disturbed because I'm a police officer on duty.
Well, I don't see the benefit of this then, because we have that now. Someone can call in at 6:30 in the morning and say they're jackhammering. Can you send them over there? If they won't sign a complaint.
I think the benefit of it is from an education perspective with people who come in and get building permits. You can provide that information to them, and it certainly sets a time frame around that. So it's much more proactive, and it's in line with what other communities have. So I can tell you that in the last month, I've probably had a complaint a week about construction activity that's come to my desk.
So it's very occurring, great deal. Do we need to select one of these at this time, or do you want to bring that up again?
If you have some direction on what hours you would like to see or any other specifics or parameters around it, you can give that tonight. Otherwise, we can bring back some options. I think Mr. Urban might have some.
Mr. Urban?
I guess I'd be in favor of allowing those that are working to work within reasonable noise levels, but as it relates to the time of day, I think 6 a.m. is appropriate because that's when the sun's up and they're working, and to have them stall out for an hour just to mind the peace doesn't necessarily, rise to the threshold for me. So I think 6 a.m. is appropriate, and as late as 9 p.m. That does seem rather late and doesn't keep a neighbor from going over and saying to someone, hey, can you keep it down, or I'm trying to sleep, because there's people that sleep during the day, and that's a totally different situation for them. But I think as far as specific hours, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., but again, the enforcement and the education of the contractors as they come into the city, I think is a more important aspect than necessarily the ordinance, because it's not necessarily, it's like you said, unless you have someone to sign it. And I've run into that before as well, where I'll get a call from a neighbor saying, well, this person's doing this. Well, you need to call the police and sign a complaint, and they're unwilling to do that. So then it continues to be an issue. So encouraging people to sign that complaint would also be an education piece as well.
So you're advocating between 6 a.m. and 9,
Correct.
as well as instruction when they take out the permit. Any other thoughts on that? Jerry?
I think that's too early. I think 7 to 7 would be more of a 7 to 7 to me would be more reasonable. And then if they had to extend their time, they could contact the city and say, we're going to be working late. I guess if they have a permit and they're working on construction, they should be able to contact the city and say, we have issues. But I think 7 to 7 is probably fair.
And yours is 7 to 7. Anyone else? This feels...
I don't have a suggestion for time. I just have a question about general practices, because, and Bud probably knows more than I do about this, but is 6 a.m. an often realistic time to start construction?
Yeah, in the summer, you know, in the summer months. You know, I was, actually something else came to mind. Are we talking about all construction activity or?
Professional or
You know, I mean, we do work that you do overnight. So if we're not going to prohibit construction work between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. If you're in your basement or you're inside a tenant store and you've got to do night work, you're in the Lutheran hospital and you've got to do a night work. So when you write this ordinance, this is.
Yeah, it's just like Christie suggested, the Denver one specifically says construction activities over a certain sound threshold, so that would allow people to still work outside those hours as long as they were under a reasonable sound level.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just so we're not outlawing night work.
Yeah. And Tracy too, yeah, a lot of construction activity in the summer, they do mobilize. They maybe start at 6, maybe they're not actually start working, but they do get to the site, they start things, but maybe they don't start work until 7, so.
So then 6 o'clock wouldn't necessarily be a problem because, I mean, what I understand of construction is that you're right. You don't just show up and start working. You have to get the guys there. You have to get the materials out. You have to get equipment there, and then you start working. And that isn't something done in 15 minutes. Or at least none of the work I've seen people do gets done that fast. Especially on Youngfield.
If you want to restrict it to 7 a.m., that doesn't mean they can't come to the site earlier. They just can't make tons of noise.
Okay.
Yeah, my point was with 7 was the fact that the dump trucks are 7 a.m. so that we keep it consistent. But they can show up and start working as long as it's not noise, you know, or loading stuff.
Okay, we have 2 different versions here now, which were 6 a.m. to, what was yours, 6 a.m. to 9, and yours was 7 to 7. Any other selections we have in here? George?
Well, I can see both sides of it. Frankly, I think trying to align with some of the municipalities around us makes some sense, just as a reference to people, you know, who contractors who are used to that type of thing. 7 has generally been what I understand, but that's probably because I'm more used to work in Denver proper. So Lakewood 6 a.m. You know, I don't know that I have a strong feeling between 6 and 7, but I think going to 9 o'clock seems to be consistent amongst the communities. So I'd
like
say
to kind of go with something
7
similar our
to 9, 6 to 9.
Okay.
That's fine. 7 and 9 works for me.
Okay, we've got that. Where are we now? Nobody has any strong feeling. I'm sorry?
I mean, I just want to make sure we have the noise threshold or the
Reasonableness, yeah.
reasonable,
So you're not recommending to buy those decibel meters, are you?
I'm just what we're used to doing.
So right now, what we're used to is deals with reasonableness, and there's a standard of 25 feet beyond, the property line of the property.
Yeah,
So if you've got the beeping,
I guess
forklift.
my question is if
We say 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And so let's just pretend, someone's out in my garage with the floodlight on, I don't know, doing whatever.
tile, yeah.
Cutting tile, which is kind of noisy, but not real noisy, but are, doing whatever. Does that mean they can't do it because it's 9:30 at night?
If the sound
Or,
is reasonable.
so we're going to do time and sound. We're not going to just do time.
And you got to get a complaint.
They can be grinding away until 9, according if you're drafted it this way.
Regardless, and then
yeah.
after 9, it has to meet the reasonable
It'd be
factor.
unreasonable.
Okay, that's cool.
That's good. George, you have
Well, no, I think that's fine. Obviously, as it gets drafted and brought back to us, I think some of these details will flesh out. And I imagine Lakewood or Denver has some other information to make sure that it's enforceable. To me, the biggest thing, and I have gotten calls on this, I think, is being able to point our citizens and/or people working in our community to something that's makes that can make sense and is clear.
Thank you. We'll bring something back for further review.
Okay, we're under elected officials' reports. Do we have anything specific? Fitzgerald?
Would just like to congratulate a student from District 3, Sonia Morin, who qualified for the USA Track and Field National Junior Olympics in Jacksonville.
Very nice. Anyone else? Well, let me bring up the discussion that we had. We didn't really have a discussion, which is what we need, as far as having a town hall meeting. The end of August was the time we were looking at. This would be a full town hall meeting at the Recreation Center. Mr. Starker originally brought it to my attention, and the possibilities of having that with a little bit of a different kind of a twist to it, in the sense that I think we would all like to have more communication with our citizens. So the thought was that we would start out with a 6 to 8 time frame, with the first 30 minutes being so we have an opportunity that citizens would come and talk to us. We would have tables arranged. They would have an opportunity to talk to us, and then we have formal presentations, about an hour and a half of that, and then return then to about an hour, I think it was, back to the table so that they could once again engage with us individually. Anything else that we'd want to add to that?
You came up with
name.
some agenda items,
Yes,
potential
agenda
agenda items, I think.
Yes, which I don't have.
Just, let's see, Wadsworth, we could do an update on Wadsworth Pell on the 38th Avenue contract. The city just is entering into a contract with a firm to help with that process. The TOD site, TIF, if we wanted to have a discussion about TIF. I think those are the major items you guys came up with. Anything else that anybody wants to?
Drainage. I think drainage.
Drainage.
The floodplain, all that.
I think
Yeah, Mark Westberg asked if he could do have some
General
information on
review of what's
floodplain
going
drainage.
And we'll be using experts in those areas, along with some, boards demonstrating visually.
The RTD said they would like to come in and present on what's going on with the commuter rail station.
Both the artwork as well as the design of the station.
Wadsworth Pell, our consultant, said they would come in and give an update on that.
So just another question on that. Will we also be having some of our community groups there, or inviting them? Because, like for instance, I'm just thinking if we're talking about 38th Avenue, I know there's been a kind of informal group of citizens that have been meeting and
I would think
talking,
that
so
wherever they fit into those tables,
that they could maybe engage other folks that are here, and then also folks can see that it's, that we're trying to bring folks in to help with some of the decision process. And
very much so.
The only concern I had was the length of the presentations. I think we've seen in the past that an hour is going to be long. I mean, if you can cut the presentations back to 45 minutes, I think people really want to go and talk rather than just being talked to.
I agree.
So, but I think if you open up to other groups, you're going to get a lot of political groups in there. You're going to get groups that are supporting certain ballot questions, groups that are anti-this, pro-that. So I think it really should be a city function, city groups. That's just my suggestion, rather than letting any group come in. I have a concern.
Yeah, I do think this should not be a political meeting at all. This is informational. So I think we would have to be very careful about, that's a good point, political groups. That's not what we're trying
So I would just suggest we did our formal presentations, maybe half hour, 45 minutes max.
Well, that's half hour might be a little tight for as many as we've discussed here. But
I think we can get it closer to 40 though.
45 minutes.
40, 45, yeah. I think he's right. I think we should keep them as short as possible and just do quick updates. And then if they want more information, they can go to the table and get more information.
Right.
My intent wasn't, for people to go in and pros and cons. I just, I think a lot of what the city, and I could see how if we open it up to one group, how all the groups would want to come. But my intention was more, like for instance, 38th Avenue, a lot of what we've heard is you're not hearing us, you're not doing what the people want. And when in fact we actually have a group of community members and non-elected officials aren't included in that group to kind of hash out what the vision might be. So, but I can understand that if you invite one, you're going to end up with all of them. So.
Mr. Urban.
I guess my concern, specifically listing the items here under the item of TIF, if you don't want to make this political, then don't discuss the TIF in this meeting. It's on the ballot, and if you're discussing this, whether it's informational or political, it's going to be considered as political. And I personally, I think it's a little bit of a bad timing to have this town hall meeting as candidates are declared, and it would be considered just sort of an active election season, and we're having a town hall meeting, and I don't think that that's well thought out, and I would rather push this until after the election versus having this in the middle of what would be a live election. So I would like to move this to either first part of November or December, but to have this meeting and this town hall meeting while we have declared candidates and talking about the TIF as it's described right now, I think that's just asking for trouble, and I think it needs to be as delineated as possible between what we are doing on city council and what is being considered as political. So I would rather just sort of either eliminate the TIF discussion from this or postpone this until later on so that there isn't that perception of conflict.
Other thoughts on that? Mr. Fitzgerald?
I just would like to disagree a little bit. I agree that we should never have any political points of view in this meeting, but the TIF issue is something that affects the future of this city. It's very important to the future of this city. And I think it's reasonable that we not ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist and just have a factual discussion of what the pro and con means without having a political bent to this. And I agree that none of the partisans should have anything to say about this, but I think we should have a non-biased, factual presentation about TIF because it is so important to our future.
And there are things on both sides that are that way. Ms. Davis?
Well, I think just in addition to both comments is, I'm aware, and everyone else is because they're all starting to talk about it, is the Fair Campaigning Practice Act. So there's only going to be so much that we're going to be able to do that doesn't look like campaigning. So, and I know probably Jerry Dahl will have a say in that. So, I think the point is we're not doing it to lobby one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And as long as we have legal guidelines of you can do this, I'm just thinking from urban renewal perspective. There is nothing wrong with saying this is urban renewal and this is what we've done. That is, that has nothing, that's not against the Fair Campaign Practice Act and those types of things. So I just think if we had guidance that at least we presented it neutral and fair is
Would
what I
Urban
would
Renewal
support.
be one of the groups that you're thinking of?
Well, I don't know if that would be a part of the TIF group or, whatever's decided when we finally decide it. But, I do think, again, we're going to have to follow some of that, the Fair Campaign Practice Act. And,
right.
Exactly. So we're going to have to be mindful that.
If we buy one cookie for it, we better be very careful. Yeah.
Well, that's my concern. Is Tim just mentioned pro and con about TIF. Well, that's the problem because we're using city facilities to talk about a pro and a con. Now, if we had a presentation about urban renewal in general and said, here's our tools and here's our projects, and just kept TIF out of it, because I know what's going to happen is if we have TIF as a discussion, you're going to have people coming in with flyers.
Yes, I think that's how it needs to be.
So it needs to be urban renewal making a presentation, not urban renewal, but who's information about urban renewal. Here's the projects, here's our tools, done. And then if people want to ask about TIF to someone there, that they can, but it has to be the broader issue of what urban renewal does versus what a TIF is, because urban renewal has other tools, and they've done other projects.
I think that was, I did mention that was another potential agenda item, was to look at, just give an update on economic development projects.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Jen?
I think my comment is that the meeting could be beneficial in that it's not only hitting on that one topic, but it's hitting on the TOD issue, the Pell study. So we could have a meeting to give some really good information about various projects to the citizens. But one thing I'm hearing is that people are saying, you're not listening to me, I don't have a chance to talk. So if the citizens are really wanting that, I think it's important to either, and I know we did this one time before, either do a public comment, or if they want to come, I think you're saying tables and come to talk to people directly, that they have a chance to come and talk to you. We just have to be aware of, you know, how we respond, and maybe that we're listening to them. And that's what I'm hearing, that people feel that's not happening. We hear a lot of different points of view, but if they want to stand in a public forum and say something, that maybe that's what they're looking for, to give their opinion publicly.
My hope was by having the tables that those who are shy, who don't want to do something, it gives them an opportunity to come to the table and ask. We'll have at the tables both experts, we'll call that staff, you're experts, right? Yes, I mean they are. We'll have staff people or TOD people, whatever, as well as council members who may choose. You can wander around and do whatever you want to do, trying not to, you know, abandon some table to make sure the tables are always covered by somebody in council. Giving those citizens an opportunity to talk to their council member or on that subject.
And we could have note cards that people can just write stuff on, comments, just open general comments, and we'll tabulate those and bring them back so you guys can see what they say and provide different means, because everybody, yeah.
Interesting idea.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard, is that what Genevieve's mentioned is that they don't want to be talked at, they want to be actually listened to. So if we can cut back the presentation so they could actually get out there and talk to council people and talk to staff and talk, you know, so it's a two-way conversation. That's what they want, is a two-way
Well, if we
conversation.
have 5 presentations at 10 minutes each, that's 50 minutes, so,
Well, maybe we only have 4.
yeah. So we can get it, our goal is like 45 minutes.
Well, yeah, if we're not going to do one specifically on TIF, which I'm hearing, that knocks it off. We can just do economic development, the Pell, TOD, 38th Avenue, that's 4. 10 minutes apiece, that's 40 minutes, so then open it up.
But how can you have a table that says urban renewal if you haven't also brought it up in the,
Well, that could be brought up as the economic development updates. That's one of the topics.
I see is saying, you know, here's urban renewal, because I think even globally, you know, that's getting looked at. So I think you could easily say, here are some very successful projects, and not really, I mean, you still have to kind of talk about how we got there, but it was using those tools and not specifically, you know.
urban renewal would be a part of that collection of economic
Yeah,
development?
PIF, TIF, STEP.
Right, okay.
Then there's going to be, departments will have other items at the tables too about other things that we're not even going to talk about, but just, you know, crime prevention stuff. The police department always likes to have their, like Bud said, their little pig heads and
Yeah.
free pins, and the Parks and Rec will have stuff, trail maps and stuff, so.
What do they call that?
Bling.
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 But I think it's really important for
Swag.
the counselors to be there so that citizens can engage them in a conversation, you know.
Well, the two things that I was going to mention that we used to do that was good for two-way communication. One was we used to actually, every month, we used to have the first Monday meetings where district people met with their constituents in their districts. Now, I don't know if we have to do it every month now, but instead of having a study session, we had a meeting in each district with citizens, and the staff would be there. They had one staff person for support, and then they had the two council members, and then citizens were able to come in and talk to their council people, and then there was some minor updates, but I don't know if you want to do it every month like we used to. That was kind of monotonous, but we used to do it more than often than not every month. And then the other thing we tried once was when you have those call-ins, you have the people ask questions and they call in, and council people can ask. We did it once. It was kind of funny and kind of cool. But you could actually call in, ask a question, and there was a delay on, so if someone was cussing out everybody, they got cut off. But you could actually have people call in and they ask questions, and that could kind of go back to what Mr. Goff mentioned. If you had these cards where people wrote questions, we could actually answer them at a study session or somehow some kind of a
Kind of an ongoing, more
forum
of this
type of thing. Yeah, you
face-to-face
can
concept.
tape it or whatever you want to
Right.
do to it. Put it on YouTube.
Sounds good. All right. So do we need a consensus on this? Are we liking the form? Is it looking good? Okay,
Okay, great, thanks.
we're good, thank you.
Bang that gavel.
Meeting's over.